I never thought I'd be the one writing something like this, but lately I can't stop questioning if maybe I overreacted. I'm a 29-year-old woman, and a few months ago, I broke off my engagement after discovering something so disturbing that even now, retelling it makes me shake. I was with my fiancé Oliver for almost 3 years. We met at a university event when I was finishing my degree in architecture, and he was already working as a mechanical engineer. He was charming, patient, intelligent, the kind of man my friends said seemed too good to be true. Maybe they were right. Oliver's parents, especially his father, always seemed a little intense. They were members of a small, conservative church that emphasized family hierarchy and purity. I didn't share those beliefs, but I respected them, at least until they stopped respecting me. From the beginning, his mother, Susan, kept a polite distance. She wasn't rude, but there was a coldness in her tone, like every word came through a filter of judgment. His father, Mr. Lang, on the other hand, was the kind of man who took pride in being the head of the family. He often told me that marriage wasn't just a partnership, but a sacred structure with clear roles. I used to smile awkwardly when he said things like that, thinking he was just old-fashioned. Fast forward to last spring, Oliver and I were already engaged, planning a small ceremony for early autumn. Everything was running smoothly until one evening, while having dinner with him, I mentioned something that would change everything. We were reminiscing about our college years, and I casually brought up an old relationship I'd had. Nothing dramatic, just a year-long romance that ended amicably before I ever met him. I didn't even think twice about mentioning it. But Oliver froze. He didn't say much, just nodded, though I noticed his hands trembled slightly as he wiped his mouth. The next day he was distant, but insisted he was fine. I should have known something was wrong. A few days later, I received a message from Susan asking if I could visit them that weekend. She said they wanted to discuss something important for the future of the family. I assumed it was about wedding logistics, maybe guest lists or the ceremony. When I arrived at their home that Saturday, I instantly knew something was off. There were more people than I expected, not only Oliver's parents, but also his aunt, two older couples from their church, and even his pastor. Everyone was sitting in the living room, quiet, staring at me when I walked in. Oliver was there too, looking pale, avoiding my eyes. Mr. Lang started speaking with a solemn voice, saying that serious concerns had been raised about my suitability as a wife for Oliver. My heart began racing. I asked what he meant. That's when he said the words I'll never forget. He wanted to confirm my purity before allowing the marriage to continue. For a second, I didn't even understand. I thought it was some sort of metaphor, maybe about faith or commitment, but no, he literally meant a physical examination to ensure I was untouched. I laughed nervously at first, thinking it had to be a joke. Nobody laughed. Instead, Susan nodded in agreement, saying this was a family tradition, something all the women who married into the Lang family had gone through. She said she herself had been examined by her father-in-law decades ago, and that it was a blessing that brought peace to their marriage. I looked around the room, waiting for someone to say this was insane, but no one did. Even Oliver just sat there, silent, eyes on the floor. My first reaction was disbelief, then anger. I told them what they were suggesting was disgusting, invasive, and completely unacceptable. Mr. Lang's tone turned sharp. He said I was being prideful and disrespectful toward their spiritual customs. Susan said she was disappointed, that my reaction showed I lacked humility and wasn't ready to be a wife. The pastor murmured that sometimes the devil fills women's hearts with rebellion. I remember my voice shaking as I said, I would never agree to anything like that. That's when things escalated. Susan grabbed my arm, trying to calm me down, whispering that it would only take a few minutes, that I would regret losing a good man over stubbornness. Mr. Lang raised his voice, saying that if I refused, they couldn't allow Oliver to marry me because the family's blessing depended on proof of purity. The entire room seemed to close in on me. I turned to Oliver, the man I loved, the man I was supposed to spend my life with, and asked him to say something. Anything. He hesitated, then said quietly, Maybe just hear them out. It's not as bad as it sounds. I felt the world collapse inside me. I pulled my arm away, told them they were insane, and ran out of that house. I remember getting into my car, shaking so hard I could barely start the engine. I drove straight to my parents' home and cried until I couldn't breathe. When I told my mother what had happened, she was horrified. My father wanted to go there immediately, but she stopped him. Later that night, Oliver texted me saying I'd embarrassed him in front of his family. He said his father only wanted to protect him from deceitful women. That message broke something inside me. I blocked him and every member of his family. The next morning, I called off the engagement. I thought that would be the end of it. A painful chapter, but one I could move on from. I had no idea it was only the beginning. The days after breaking off the engagement were a blur. I remember alternating between relief and disbelief. Relief that I'd escaped something deeply wrong, and disbelief that people could justify that kind of violation under the name of faith. My parents were my anchors during that time. They reminded me that I had done the right thing, that love built on control isn't love at all. I tried to focus on small routines again, morning walks, work at my design firm, evening tea with my mom, but peace didn't last long. It started subtly. My father, who owns a small hardware store, told me that Mr. Lang had come by pretending to look for electrical supplies. He didn't buy anything, just stood near the counter asking if I was ready to repent. My dad told him to leave, and he did, but that was only the beginning. Within days, he began visiting again, always with the same rehearsed, calm voice, saying things like, "I only wish to speak to your daughter before she ruins her destiny." When my dad threatened to call the police, he finally backed off, but not before saying, "A father who lets his daughter walk in sin will share her punishment." Meanwhile, my mom started getting calls from women in their community, acquaintances, old neighbors, asking what had happened between me and Oliver. Some even said Susan had reached out to them out of concern, claiming that I had humiliated her son and made up lies about their family. Apparently, Susan had told people that I was mentally unstable and that my modern lifestyle had turned me away from God. That phrase, modern lifestyle, spread like wildfire. Then came the messages. I don't know how, but Mr. Lang somehow got my new phone number. The first text was a Bible verse about impurity and forgiveness. The second was a paragraph saying that I had brought shame upon a righteous man and that I still had a chance to be cleansed through truth. I blocked the number immediately. A day later, another number appeared, sending similar messages, then another. I blocked them all, but they kept coming. Some were signed with "Grace from the Lord," others anonymous. They all had the same tone, guilt, manipulation, and religion used as a weapon. I changed my number again and deleted social media for a while. But that didn't stop them. A coworker once asked me if I was okay because she'd received a strange email from a church member asking if I still worked there, claiming they were worried about my spiritual state. I was mortified. I told her to delete it and promised I'd handle it, though I didn't even know where to begin. About 3 weeks after I'd cut all contact, Oliver sent me a letter, an actual physical letter delivered to my parents' house. My mother didn't give it to me right away. She wanted to protect me. But curiosity got the better of me. It was handwritten in his neat mechanical script, full of contradictions. He said he loved me, that he forgave me for my rebellion, and that he still wanted to marry me if I apologized to his family. He even wrote, "You know deep down that my father's methods are rooted in faith, not malice." I tore that letter into pieces. I began to realize that this wasn't just a family feud, it was an obsession. Mr. Lang seemed convinced he had some divine mission to correct me. A few people in their congregation even started showing up at my parents' home pretending to be missionaries. One afternoon, 2 women rang the bell, holding prayer pamphlets. When my mom answered, they asked if the daughter who had strayed still lived there. My mom slammed the door so hard that one of the leaflets got caught between the hinges. I still have it. It says, "A pure heart restores the home." I tried not to let fear rule me, but every time my phone buzzed, my stomach knotted. I stopped going out alone after dark. My dad started closing the store earlier because he noticed unfamiliar cars parked outside more often than usual. We didn't have proof they were connected, but the timing was too suspicious. Then things escalated again, this time online. A friend called me one evening to ask if I'd really said the things she'd seen on social media. Confused, I asked what she meant. She sent me screenshots of fake messages supposedly between me and another friend where I bragged about using Oliver for his money and called his family religious idiots. The screenshots looked eerily real. They had my old profile photo, the same chat format. Whoever did it had studied me closely. Within hours, the fake chats spread. People from my old circle, colleagues, neighbors, even relatives, started calling or texting me, asking if it was true. I kept repeating that it was fabricated, but it was like shouting into a storm. Mr. Lang's allies, mostly members of his church, began commenting cryptic things online like, "The truth will always come out," and "repent before judgment." The damage was done. Oliver eventually joined the performance. He posted a picture of us together with a caption that said, "Even those who hurt us deserve forgiveness." Hundreds of people commented, calling him brave, kind, and pure-hearted. Some even said things like, "She doesn't deserve you." I felt physically ill reading that. The man who watched me cry while his family tried to humiliate me was now playing the role of a victim of betrayal. I wish I could say I didn't care, but I did. My name was being dragged through mud, and all I could do was watch. My parents were being judged by association. My mom stopped going to her yoga class because the whispers became unbearable. My dad's store lost a few regular customers, all of them members of that church. That's when I realized this wasn't going to stop on its own. They had turned me into their personal villain, and no amount of silence would change that. So I decided to speak up, publicly. I spent a whole weekend drafting my post. At first, I just wanted to scream into the void, but I knew that if I wanted to stop them, I needed to do it right. So I wrote everything in detail, how Mr. Lang demanded that purity test, how they tried to corner me, how Oliver stood by doing nothing, and how their harassment escalated afterward. I included screenshots of the messages, photos of the letters, and blurred out the names of my parents for their safety. I posted it on Facebook first, then shared it on a subreddit that focuses on real-life confessions. I wasn't looking for pity. I wanted witnesses, people who could see how twisted the situation had become. Within hours, my post exploded. Hundreds of comments poured in. Most people were horrified, saying it sounded like a cult. A few said I should have gone to the police long ago. Some even shared their own stories of controlling in-laws and religious manipulation. It was the first time in months that I didn't feel crazy. But, of course, it didn't take long for the Lang family to find out. That same night, I received a message from an unknown account saying, "You think airing lies in public will make you safe?" I reported and blocked it immediately, but deep down I knew it was them. The next morning, my mom called me crying. Mr. Lang and Susan had shown up at my parents' house again, this time with 3 other people from their church. They stood outside the gate singing hymns loudly as if performing some sort of deliverance ritual. My dad told them to leave, but they just kept singing, saying they were praying for me, and it only stopped when a neighbor threatened to call the police. When they finally left, my parents found an envelope taped to the gate. Inside was a printed copy of my post, annotated with Bible verses about shame and repentance written in red pen. I felt sick. How far would they go? I started saving every message, every visit, every photo. My parents helped me install security cameras, and I started sleeping with my phone recording whenever I heard noises outside my apartment. Then, one afternoon, I got called into my manager's office at work. She looked uncomfortable and told me someone had sent an email to HR claiming I was unstable and spreading religious hatred. They even attached links to my Reddit and Facebook posts, accusing me of defamation against a faith-based community. My heart dropped. I explained the situation, showed her the police report I had already started preparing, and thankfully, she believed me. But I could tell this had shaken her trust. I went home feeling both humiliated and furious. A few days later, my mom found something terrifying. Someone had spray painted on their garden wall in thick black letters, "Repent, Jezebel." My dad took photos and filed another police report, but the officers said that unless we had footage of who did it, it would be difficult to prove. Around that same time, one of my cousins reached out, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. She said she'd received a visit from 2 men from the Lang's church. They claimed they were worried about me, that I'd fallen into sin and needed guidance. She told them to leave, but they insisted on praying for my salvation. My cousin said she didn't believe a word they said, but the fact that they had tracked down extended family members freaked me out. At this point, I knew I needed legal help. I hired an attorney, a woman named Nora, who specialized in harassment and defamation cases. She was calm, methodical, and not easily intimidated. She told me to gather every bit of evidence I could and to stop responding to anything from them, no matter how tempting it was to defend myself. "They want to provoke you," she said. "Don't give them that satisfaction." So I followed her advice. Every time I got a message or email, I forwarded it to her and then blocked the sender. Every time someone told me about another rumor, I documented it. I kept a digital folder labeled Proof, Lang Family. It grew so fast that I started needing subfolders, emails, photos, witnesses. But despite having an attorney, I still felt powerless. The internet had already decided who I was. Some people thought I was brave, others thought I was a liar looking for attention. One particularly nasty comment said, "You're just mad your ex has morals." That one hurt more than it should have. Nora told me we could file for a restraining order and a defamation suit, but that it might take months. Meanwhile, I had to keep myself safe. My parents started staying at my apartment on weekends because they didn't feel comfortable at their own house anymore. I hated seeing them live in fear because of me. About 2 weeks after I posted the story, I received an email that made my blood run cold. The subject line said, "You can still save yourself." It was a long message full of religious rhetoric claiming that the Lord forgives the disobedient when they return to the path. It was signed, "A Concerned Father." I knew immediately who it was. He wasn't even trying to hide anymore. Nora said that was exactly the kind of thing we needed, proof of continued contact after being told to stop. She added it to the case file. But emotionally, I was breaking down. I had nightmares almost every night. Dreams where I'd be trapped in a room while faceless people chanted prayers around me. I woke up sweating, heart pounding, checking my locks over and over. My best friend Layla started coming over just to keep me company. One night she said something that stuck with me. "They're trying to make you feel crazy so you'll doubt your own story. Don't let them win." It made sense. That was exactly how I felt, like I was slowly losing my grip on reality. I hadn't done anything wrong, yet somehow I was the one living in hiding while they carried on publicly as if they were the victims. I knew this wasn't just about religion anymore. It was about control, ego, and a man obsessed with power disguised as faith. A month passed before anything concrete happened. The police finally called to say they had begun investigating the Langs formally after my lawyer filed the harassment report. Still, I couldn't relax. The damage was already spreading further than I ever imagined. A colleague pulled me aside one morning to say that rumors had reached another branch of our company. Apparently, someone was calling me the woman who faked abuse for attention. I didn't even know who started that version of the story anymore. Maybe Oliver, maybe one of the church people, repeating whatever they were told. Every time I thought the gossip had died down, it found new soil somewhere else. Meanwhile, my parents' neighborhood started to feel like a surveillance zone. My dad told me he'd seen the same gray SUV parked near their street several nights in a row. Once he walked toward it, but it drove off quickly. They didn't have clear footage, only blurry images from the cameras we'd installed, but it was enough to show it wasn't just paranoia. My mom began sleeping with the lights on, afraid someone might try to break in. Then came the fake apology campaign. Out of nowhere, Susan posted a long Facebook message saying she and her husband forgave me for the pain I had caused. She wrote that, "No family is perfect, and sometimes young women act rashly when overwhelmed by guilt." She even asked others to pray for me. Hundreds of comments poured in, all sympathizing with them. People called her a saint for being so forgiving. I felt physically ill reading it. The manipulation was so perfect, it almost looked like performance art. I responded only once. I wrote a calm, factual comment saying that her message was misleading and that I had legal counsel involved due to ongoing harassment. Within minutes, my comment disappeared, deleted, and I was blocked from the page. Later that night, new posts appeared accusing me of attacking an elderly couple online. It was a losing battle. That was when my lawyer advised me to go silent online. "The internet rewards whoever shouts last, not whoever's right," she said. "Let your evidence speak in court." I followed her advice, but it was painful to stay quiet while strangers called me delusional or vindictive. Then something even more disturbing happened. One afternoon, I was driving home from work when I noticed a car behind me. Dark blue, tinted windows. It stayed on my tail through 3 turns and a traffic light. My heart started racing. I pulled into a grocery store parking lot, hoping it would pass. It didn't. It slowed down too, circling once before speeding away. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely text my lawyer. She told me to go straight to the police. I did. They took the report but said unless I had a license plate, they couldn't prove who it was. I knew, deep down, it had something to do with the Langs. That night, I barely slept. My parents begged me to move temporarily to their house, but I didn't want to put them in more danger. We decided they'd come stay with me instead. We even rearranged my small apartment to fit them comfortably. For a while, having them there brought some peace, until the next morning when my father found a note taped to the apartment door. It said, "Running doesn't erase sin." That was the moment everything changed. My dad called the police again, and this time they took it seriously. An officer came to the apartment, took photos, and promised to patrol the area more often. My lawyer expedited the request for a restraining order. I felt both terrified and strangely validated. Finally, there was proof that I wasn't imagining things. A week later, the court granted the order. The Langs and Oliver were legally forbidden from contacting or approaching me or my parents. For the first time in months, I could breathe. But peace didn't come easily. The gossip continued. And the community's sympathy still leaned heavily toward them. They had the church behind them. I had screenshots and exhaustion. I tried to move forward. I started therapy, trying to rebuild some sense of normalcy. My therapist said something that stuck with me. Trauma doesn't only come from violence. It also comes from disbelief. That line hit me hard. What destroyed me wasn't just what they did, but how people refused to see it for what it was. Things were starting to stabilize when I received an email from a journalist who had seen my online post before I deleted it. She was working on a feature about spiritual abuse in religious communities and wanted to interview me anonymously. I hesitated. I didn't want more attention, but I also wanted the truth to reach someone beyond the gossip circles. I forwarded the message to my lawyer. She told me to wait until after the first hearing. Then the vandalism began again. My parents' old house, which had been empty for weeks, was defaced. This time, in red paint, someone wrote, "Unclean woman." A neighbor took a picture before cleaning part of it. We gave the image to the police. The officer said something that chilled me. "They're trying to scare you into silence." My father decided then that enough was enough. He arranged for their house to be temporarily rented out to a friend and said they would stay with relatives in another city until things calmed down. Watching them pack up their life of 25 years because of someone else's delusion made me furious, but also determined. I wasn't going to let them win. I wasn't going to let a man in his 60s with a God complex and his cowardly son decide who I was. The next few weeks were a mix of exhaustion, fear, and defiance. Every small task, buying groceries, answering the phone, walking my dog, carried a background buzz of anxiety. But I was alive, protected, and ready to fight. By the time the first hearing date arrived, I was emotionally drained, but oddly calm. My lawyer, Nora, had prepared everything. The printed messages, the photos of the vandalism, the screenshots of the fake posts, even testimony from a neighbor who'd seen the Lang's car parked near my parents' house. Walking into that courtroom felt like walking through a tunnel, my heart racing, palms sweating, but with a faint light of hope at the end. The Langs were there, of course. Mr. Lang looked as self-righteous as ever. Standing straight with his Bible under one arm, Susan sat beside him, holding tissues like she was the one who'd been wronged. And then there was Oliver, sitting quietly behind them, his head bowed, a performance of humility that made me want to scream. When the judge called my name, they all turned toward me with the same expression, pity mixed with disdain. I didn't look away. My lawyer spoke clearly and firmly. She explained the pattern of harassment, the manipulation under religious pretense, and the emotional damage it had caused. Then she handed over the evidence piece by piece. I remember seeing the judge's eyebrows rise slightly when she reached the part about the purity test. He asked, "Are you telling me this man demanded a physical examination before allowing the marriage?" Nora nodded. Mr. Lang interrupted, saying something about tradition and spiritual accountability. The judge silenced him immediately, reminding him that he was not in church, but in a court of law. That moment was deeply satisfying, watching his confidence crack even just for a second. The hearing ended with the restraining order being upheld and extended. The judge also warned them that any further contact, direct or indirect, would result in criminal charges. As I walked out of the courthouse, I felt an enormous weight lift off me, but the victory was bittersweet. This wasn't the kind of justice that erased the past, it just kept it from getting worse. In the following weeks, I started seeing a therapist twice a week. I didn't realize how much the whole ordeal had rewired my brain, the way every sound made me flinch, the way every text message made my stomach twist. My therapist said I was experiencing hypervigilance, a common response after prolonged psychological trauma. She told me I wasn't broken, just reacting to months of fear. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Even after the restraining order, I'd sometimes catch a glimpse of a car parked near my apartment that looked too familiar. Once, I walked into the grocery store and saw someone from the Lang's church in the next aisle pretending to read labels, but clearly following me. I didn't confront them. I just left my cart and drove home. It was like trying to live a normal life with ghosts following you. A friend of mine suggested I move cities altogether, but I was tired of running. I'd already built a new life here. My job, my apartment, my small but loyal circle of friends. Why should I give that up? Instead, I started taking precautions. New security cameras, pepper spray in my purse, self-defense classes on Saturdays. It made me feel a little stronger, even if fear still sat somewhere in the back of my mind. One evening, while scrolling through Reddit, I stumbled upon a thread about controlling families. People were sharing their experiences, stories eerily similar to mine. That's when I decided to share my story again, but this time on Ami the Asshole, where people weigh in on moral dilemmas. I wanted to ask, not for sympathy, but for perspective. I began my post the same way I began telling you now. My ex-fiancé's father demanded to test my purity before our wedding, and when I refused, they tried to destroy my life. I explained everything from the confrontation to the stalking to the court case. I ended the post with the question that had been haunting me for months. Was I wrong to run? The response was overwhelming. Thousands of comments flooded in. Most people called me brave. Some said they'd gone through similar situations and felt validated reading my story. A few pointed out red flags I hadn't even noticed, like how Oliver had shown submissive behavior toward his father from the start. One comment that stuck with me said, "You didn't destroy a relationship. You escaped a cult." Reading those messages was like therapy in itself. For the first time, I didn't feel alone, but even that had consequences. A few days after the post went viral, one of the church members created an account just to reply under my thread. The comment read, "Be careful what lies you spread. God sees everything." I reported it and moved on, but it reminded me that the internet isn't a shield. The line between digital and real harassment had blurred long ago. Through all this, Oliver never once reached out again. Not directly. I sometimes wonder if he believes his father or if he knows deep down how wrong it all was. Maybe he's too afraid to admit it. Maybe it's easier for him to let everyone think I'm the villain than to face his own weakness. Either way, I've stopped trying to understand him. What surprised me most was how much healing came from telling the story out loud, not to the police, not to lawyers, but to strangers, people who had no reason to lie or judge, who just read, thought, and responded honestly. Their collective verdict echoed one message: you are not the asshole for protecting your dignity. It's strange how validation from strangers can feel more real than forgiveness from people who supposedly love you. But that's the world we live in now. Still, even with all the support, there are moments when doubt creeps back in. On sleepless nights, I replay that living room scene in my head. The circle of faces judging me, the pastor murmuring about rebellion, Oliver sitting silent. I sometimes wonder, what if I had stayed quiet, agreed to their absurd test, just to keep the peace? Would my life have been easier? Maybe. But then, I remember that easy and right are rarely the same thing. It's been almost a year now since everything happened, and I'm still rebuilding. Sometimes I think I've finally moved on. I laugh with friends again. I sleep through the night. I can walk down the street without scanning every parked car. But then something random will trigger it. a sermon playing from a passing car, a man's deep voice saying the word obedience, a wedding invitation arriving in the mail, and my chest tightens all over again. Trauma doesn't vanish. It hides in small corners of your life, waiting to be noticed. The restraining order is still active, and the Langs have kept their distance, at least officially. My parents eventually moved back into their home, though they keep their cameras on and never answer the door unless they recognize the voice outside. They've grown quieter since all of this. My mom no longer chats with the neighbors the way she used to, and my dad avoids talking about anything church-related. Sometimes I feel guilty for what they went through, but they always stop me mid-apology and remind me that none of this was my fault. A few months ago, I ran into one of Oliver's old co-workers at a cafe. She told me in a low voice that Oliver had left his parents' church. Apparently, things had gotten ugly even within their congregation. People started whispering that Mr. Lang's mission had gone too far. Some families left entirely. For a second, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Because no matter how much regret or fallout there is now, it doesn't erase the nights I spent shaking, wondering what might happen next. I've learned to take control in small ways. I started writing again, journaling at first, then short essays about autonomy and faith. I even started volunteering with an organization that supports women leaving high-control religious environments. It's not something I ever imagined myself doing, but somehow, helping others survive the same darkness has been the most healing thing I could have done. Every now and then, I still get a message from a stranger online saying they read my AITA post and that it gave them courage to leave a toxic situation. That means more to me than any court ruling ever could. It's proof that something good grew out of all that chaos. I'd be lying if I said I don't still think about Oliver sometimes. Not with longing, but with confusion. How does someone you love stand there and let you be humiliated? Was it fear, indoctrination, weakness? I don't know. Maybe all three. I've accepted that I'll probably never get closure from him, and that's okay. The closure came from within, from realizing I was never crazy or dramatic or rebellious. I was simply refusing to be controlled. What hurts most is remembering the younger version of me who thought love could fix anything, the woman who believed patience and kindness could melt even the coldest traditions. If I could go back, I'd tell her, love without respect is a trap, and faith without empathy is just power disguised as holiness. The legal process isn't over yet. My lawyer says the defamation case could take months or even years. Sometimes I wonder if it's worth it, but then I remember what that judge said when he saw the evidence. No one has the right to weaponize faith. That sentence gave me back a piece of my sanity, and now sitting here typing this, I can't help but circle back to the question that started all of this. I've seen so many people online debating whether I was right or wrong, whether cutting off Oliver's family was too extreme, whether posting my story publicly was necessary. I understand why some people might think I should have handled it quietly, but when silence only protects abusers, speaking out becomes a duty. Still, I question myself sometimes. Should I have tried harder to reason with them? Should I have given Oliver another chance to prove himself? Should I have ignored the gossip instead of defending myself online? There are nights when I convince myself I could have avoided some of this if I just stayed calm or polite or quiet. But then I remember standing in that living room, surrounded by people who wanted to strip me of my dignity under the name of tradition, and I realize no amount of calm would have saved me. I've rebuilt my boundaries brick by brick, and maybe that's what maturity really means. Not pleasing everyone, but protecting your peace, even if it makes others uncomfortable. I'm not angry anymore. I'm not afraid either. I'm just someone who survived something that looked like love but wasn't. If there's one thing this experience taught me, it's that sometimes doing the right thing makes you look like the villain to those who benefit from your silence. And yet, if I had to choose again, if I had to stand in that same room, hearing that same demand, looking at Oliver's downcast eyes, I would still walk out that door. I would still run. Because no wedding, no love, no family approval is worth losing yourself. And that brings me here to this final question, the one I still ask myself whenever I doubt my choices. Am I the asshole? Oh, what do you think? Tell me in the comments below. I really want to know if you'd have done the same.